You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Nax. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Okay, raise your hand if you think audits are scary. Okay, it's a podcast. I really can't see if you're raising your hand or not. But I think the typical misperception is that audits are scary. You're going to find something bad and nothing good comes from them. That's completely wrong. We're going to talk about internal audits and why they're good for your business. Joining us today is Kara Falco. She is Director of Internal Audit at Casey's. And if you're not familiar with Casey's, they're the third largest convenience store chain in the country. And they are quite well known for what they do in internal audits and how it enhances their business. So first off, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me. I'm excited to talk about internal audit and how we can help the business, and hopefully, what I say today, other people will take and actively start engaging more with their internal audit department.
So, as I said, when people hear the word audit, whether it's finances or whether it's internal operations, the first thought is that's scary. If there's going to be a review, there's going to be a problem. But really, you want to find any problems first, because first off, you can fix them. But if you don't know about problems and somebody else does, it's a whole bigger issue. So can you just kind of set up what an internal audit is and who it can work for? Can it work for a one-store company? Can it work? We know it can work for a company with thousands of stores, but give us just a little lay of the land in terms of what an internal audit is and who can benefit.
So depending on your company, whether it's public or private, publicly traded companies are required to have internal audits. They're required to adhere to Sarbanes-Oxley. So one of the primary functions of our internal audit department is to, throughout the year, validate our SOX controls. So we go in and test and make sure that departments are doing what they said they were going to do. Being able to provide positive assurance to our leaders as well as audit committee, ultimately the board of directors, that our finances are complete and they're accurate, materially accurate. The other big role that internal audit plays at Casey's is performing assurance and advisory work. So every year, our team goes out and we perform an annual risk assessment. We do this by talking with all of the senior leaders and going down even further to director level, just to understand what's on their radar, what's coming, what do they feel like the risk to their organization is. And from that, we put together an annual audit plan. So we look at the top enterprise risk, we look at technology, we look at processes that are changing. We put together a plan and we say, here are all the areas that we're going to look at this year. So one really exciting thing about internal audit is that we aren't just focused on one area. Throughout the year, our team is going to probably have interaction with almost every single department in our organization, going in to understand the processes, learn what's changing, and then with the business, we're coming up with objectives for a review to say, what do we want to look at? What do we want to be able to provide positive assurance on, as well as identifying opportunities for improvement. So
I was going to say, you mentioned earlier, you mentioned SOX. And just for those not familiar, it's not what you put on your feet, and it's not one of two American League baseball teams. It is Sarbanes-Oxley, and it is required by an act of Congress, right?
Correct.
Is that it? To if you are publicly traded, you have to go through an internal audit.
Correct. And that can be done either internally or externally. It can be outsourced, but SOX is a requirement. I was actually, I worked at WorldCom at the time of their demise, so was heavily involved in building up our SOX program for the finance organization that I was in.
One of the things I was saying is, or want to discuss, is at what level could an internal audit play a role in? Obviously, publicly traded companies, whether you're a retailer or whether you're a supplier, but how small, how few resources? Let's just say, for instance, there's some companies that where the CEO is also the director of HR and may have a couple other hats. Is What's the level of resources do you need to do an internal audit when somebody may be strapped, or do you need to look at when there's 50 stores or higher?
I think that the level of effort that's required is really going to depend on your objectives and what you want to accomplish. We have projects where we spend 40 to 60 hours on them, one person. And then we have other projects where we've budgeted up to 1,000 hours to go in and look at an area. So really, it just depends on the scope and the subject that you're looking at. The complexity also drives how much time and effort is going to be involved.
One of the other things is one of the things I oversee is communication. So what fits into that is annual reports and what you do during the course of the year. And so when you're talking about you touch every department and have conversations with every department, I would imagine that there's also usefulness, not in just terms of how the operations are going, but in terms of storytelling and how you can save not just money, but some stories as you go through the internal audit. Do you have any interesting stories as you have worked on internal audits about cool projects or something like that?
Well, I think that all of our projects are cool, but yes, we do have some that, kind of rise to that level of, oh, that was really neat. So one thing that our team does is we've implemented what we call continuous auditing and monitoring over the last several years. So we're looking at things such as potential rewards abuse, duplicate billing. We're looking at contractual agreement compliance. So in the last 2 years at Casey's, in these areas alone, our team has either returned or avoided over $6 million in cost to the company, in inaccurate spend. So that's been a wonderful, wonderful program for our team, something that we want to continue growing. We also, as a part of just looking at potential reward abuse, we drove changes to system edits so that now you're limited to up to 10 transactions a day versus unlimited transactions a day, with that going towards your rewards points. So those are a few. We also, we are the 5th largest pizza chain. So one time, and cheese is like one of our largest prepared food commodities. So one time we did an analysis on inventory shrink, and using sales data as well as recipe specifications, we determined in 1 year we used over 7 million pounds in excess cheese, which at the time equated to about $14 million a year, that we put too much cheese on pizzas for what the recipe said. So those are some neat things that we've looked at.
That's a lot of cheese.
It's quite a bit.
So you are trained in this. This has been your career. When people are learning more about an internal audit, And if they say, well, we can't afford a firm, we can't afford to have a full-time staff person or a full-time department, but we can afford smart ideas. So how does somebody begin to look at their business differently with internal audits? Whether it's saving 7 million in cheese or 7 million pounds in cheese, and cheese is not $1 a pound, or the other things you're talking about with the rewards with 6 million. I mean, you throw 6 zeros there, and all of a sudden gets people's attention. What are the steps to begin to look at your business differently in an internal audit?
I think so. There's a couple of things that over the last several years since I've been in my role that I've really championed. And first of all, you need to build relationships with your business partners. That's key, because if you don't have a good relationship, if you don't have credibility with the people that you work with, then when you come in to review a process and you put forth recommendations, they're not going to buy into them. So, I think first and foremost, you've got to build the relationships. Second, I think that as internal auditors, we are an independent organization. So I actually report to the audit committee chairperson, and administratively, I report to our CFO. But we are completely independent. We are unbiased. So when we go into an area, we have just an open lens. And, the good thing about internal audit is that we're not all accountants. We're not all bean counters. We come from different walks of life. We have different perspectives. We've seen how things work at different organizations. So I think that also lends to credibility. But, going in and looking for opportunities, where can we make incremental improvements in our business in order to grow and to get better? And so that's we're always looking to add value. That's one of our number one goals. We definitely, we're always looking out for, strengthening the governance, the risk management, the controls processes. But we want to contribute to the success of our organization. We want to add value, and we do that by looking for opportunities for improvement. Another kind of neat thing about internal audit is that some people see us as the police, which, that's something I've been a huge champion of the last several years. I want to be a business partner, and I want to say, where can we help you? What can we do for you? Maybe there's an area that as a leader, you've been wanting to do a deep dive into, but you don't have the resources. Well, maybe that's something that we've got some hours set aside in our plan that we could come in and do that on your behalf. More than happy to. The other thing that we've seen over the last few years is that sometimes we're a good conduit to bring teams together to better collaborate. So maybe one area wants something done, but they haven't been able to get other people on board. And so having an independent analysis by internal audit sometimes acts as that glue to say, okay, we've got opportunities here. And, if we do a few things each year, we're going to incrementally improve this process. So bringing teams together to collaborate, sometimes getting things done that people haven't been able to, get done in the past.
The word that you used earlier was trust. And it seems to me that is probably the most central word that you can associate with an internal audit. And as part of trust, it's communications. And I would imagine there's two different ways a CEO can talk about an internal audit. It's like, okay, we're going to do an internal audit because something's not right in our business and we need to find out what's going on. That's going to be perceived a certain way. And if there's any problems, people will probably be people and have a tendency to push those down. The other way is the communications that you just talked about. We're going to figure out how we can be more efficient, more profitable, whether if we're publicly traded and you have stock, that benefits you. If we're not publicly traded and we're able to take resources that are redundant and apply them towards something effective, we're going to enjoy our jobs more. We're going to have more customers and all of those things. So communications is in setting up, and not only just communications, but then walking the talk, setting it up and saying, this is what we're doing. We are not looking to find fault. We are looking to find efficiencies, and efficiencies is what we all want to do.
Yeah, completely agree, Jeff. I spoke at a conference last year, and one of the things I said was that you can make or break relationships all in how you communicate. It's so important. And, it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. And that's something that we have to be very mindful of. We do have access to confidential information. We are held to higher standards. We have internal auditors have a set of standards that we have to adhere to, and we take those very seriously. And communication is key for me. Building relationships is one of the most important things that we can do in our roles.
And of course, that's building relationships where there's trust in a business environment. I would imagine, just like folks who are in human resources, there's probably not the same kind of thing like, let's go to happy hour and the debrief on the day. That's just not appropriate for you or for HR or groups like that. So what are the ways that you build trust internally, besides just absolute work performance? But any tricks in how do you, because you're not going to neighborhood bar or backyard barbecues maybe at the same level that others might. So you don't have that deeply personal conversation with some folks. What are the ways to build that trust without that?
I think a lot of it is being authentic and being true to your word, doing what you say and saying what you do. That, to me, just being authentic, being genuine, that's what I'm all about. I think that I read something earlier today that you can tell a person's character by how they treat everyone, not just how they treat, people that are, are high up or important. Mm-hmm. And, I try and treat everyone with respect, with dignity, do what I say what I do, and, just live by that.
So as you've moved along in your career, you had mentioned that you go to conferences. I imagine that there's all kinds of resources. What are some of the resources that you tap into that somebody else may want to look at, whether they're new to the idea of internal audits or they're more seasoned? What are the resources that are available out there?
Well, for internal audit, I would say one of the biggest resources is just Institute of Internal Auditors, so the IIA, which is the organization that really oversees internal audit. At conferences, I would strongly encourage people to engage in their local chapters of IIA. I would also encourage people to find mentors and work with and talk to other people who have been in internal audit. One thing about internal audit is that we don't want everyone to stay in internal audit for their entire career, right? I'm not career internal audit. I've been in internal audit for about 8 years. I was operational before that. But the great thing about taking an internal auditor and putting them out into the business is that they know process improvement. They know controls, and they can take that knowledge and they can go sit out in the business and from there make improvements and spread that knowledge and, share what they've learned. So first I would encourage, just organizational support, mentors. But the next thing I would say is don't think that you always have to stay in internal audit, because you can take that knowledge and just spread it out amongst the business, where that's only going to benefit internal audit in the long run.
So let's kind of wrap this up right now. We talked about the value of internal audits. We talked about some resources available. We talked about why it's important. Is there one thing that you would specifically suggest that everybody look at today through your lens as an internal auditor that may get them thinking more on the path about how to professionalize an internal audit? What is the one or two things, or maybe more, that you would say, look at the business this way starting now?
I would say look at your individual processes and identify where we might have opportunities, and understand that we all know, especially internal audit, that we're not going to go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, right? This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so as we look at it from internal audit, it's about incremental improvement. It's about always looking for opportunities and where we can continue to enhance, streamline, and make processes more efficient.
And the word always is very important, because sometimes businesses really only look at change or how to improve something when somebody leaves. And it's like, oh, we need to replace somebody. We need to figure out what the job description is. We need to figure out what they did, who they touched, how everything worked, and if we could do it better now. That's not the time to do it, though, because it's quite possible that person left because there were inefficient operations. So by always looking at that, it probably is also going to help with turnover.
Well, and it's good to get different perspectives, right? Because someone who's been doing something day in and day out, they might not see the bigger picture, right? They might be used to doing it one way, whereas someone, whether it be internal audit or from another department, maybe they did the same thing at another company and they, did a couple of things differently that, took it from being manual to partially automated. So really just keeping an open mind and always appreciating and respecting perspective.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Kara, and having our discussion about internal audits and enhancing operations. It's one thing to sell something. It's another thing to make money selling it. And a big part of that is operating efficiency. So thanks once again.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.